Why do you keep waking at 3 a.m. when the stars still hide their faces and the world is wrapped in silence? Why, when you want nothing more than sleep, does your body rise without asking and your eyes open to a quiet that feels almost holy and strange? You may have told yourself it's a habit, a restless phase, the result of your worries or dreams. But I tell you, my beloved, it is not merely your body that stirs at that hour. It is your soul, and it is not chance. It is summoning. You are not being disturbed. You are being called. God is knocking, softly but steadily, upon the inner temple of your being. He does not thunder when the sun is high and the mind is noisy. He waits until the world sleeps and your defenses dissolve. Then when there is space in your consciousness, he enters, unseen, but not unfelt. This is the hour when the soul begins to remember what the waking mind forgets, that we are not alone, not unloved, not adrift. You see, when you sleep, your awareness retreats from the outer theater of illusion. The senses withdraw, the breath slows, the ego loosens its grip. And in that stillness, your consciousness, no longer chained to the body, begins to float. Sometimes it drifts only to the shores of dreams. But other times, when the heart is ripe and the soul is ready, it is pulled into deeper currents toward the presence of the infinite. But why 3 a.m.? Because it is the hour of least resistance. It is the spiritual threshold between night and awakening, between the ego's slumber and the soul's whisper. Across the world, mystics have revered this time, known in Sanskrit as the Brahma Muhurta, the hour of God. It is no coincidence that saints and sages have long chosen to rise and meditate then, for at that hour the divine is near. The veil between the material and astral is thinner. The breath is quieter. The light within shines more clearly through the cracks of waking. But most do not know this. They wake and feel confused. They scroll their phones or curse the interruption. They seek explanations in clocks and chemicals, never knowing that the real reason their eyes opened was because God leaned close and whispered their name. Let me speak to the ache you felt, the one that comes in that hour when no one else is awake. That ache is not loneliness. It is longing, and not longing for anyone or anything of this world. It is the soul's cry for its beloved, the eternal companion, the light from which it came and to which it shall return. If you have felt afraid in those moments, do not be ashamed. The ego fears what it cannot control, and the presence of the infinite, even when loving, is vast and overwhelming. But I promise you that presence does not come to harm you. It comes to awaken you. So now I ask you, when you wake again at 3 a.m., what will you do? Will you resist or will you receive? Will you fall back into forgetting or will you rise into remembrance? Place your hand upon your heart. Close your eyes. Breathe slowly, not from fear, but from sacred recognition. And in that quiet chamber of your own being, say softly, "You called me, Lord. I have heard you. This hour is no mistake. I am listening. I am not disturbed. I am being prepared." This is the beginning of a different way of waking, no longer as a victim of restlessness, but as a soul stirred by divinity, no longer annoyed by the dark, but illumined by its message. Do not be afraid of 3 a.m. anymore. Be attentive, for God chooses his moments wisely, and he chooses to speak when few are listening, because those who do are ready to hear. Beloved one, let us now go deeper. When you wake at 3 a.m., you are not returning merely from sleep. You are returning from the edge of the eternal. For sleep, in the science of the soul, is not unconsciousness, but return. Return to the inner sanctum of spirit. Return to the formless source where the soul rests from its mortal dramas. The ego calls it nothingness, but the yogi knows it is everything. It is the place where the soul lays down its costume of separateness and bathes again in the oneness of God. In deep sleep, you do not cease to exist. You return to your natural state. In meditation, we try to simulate this, to lift the life force from the senses, to draw the energy into the spine, and to enter the temple of inner silence where God awaits. When you sleep, your consciousness naturally withdraws from the body and its sensory ties. But at certain hours, especially in the sacred stillness before dawn, the return to the body is not seamless. It is interrupted by light. At 3 a.m., something within you stirs. Not the mind, not the body, but the witness, the self. The soul who has seen divine realms, who remembers ancient longings, who has tasted the fragrance of spirit and longs again to merge in that cosmic light. Sometimes you wake not because you are afraid, but because your soul has seen something it cannot yet hold. A glimpse, a vibration, a message. And your physical form, still dense and earthbound, trembles beneath the contact. This is not weakness. It is awakening. You are not malfunctioning. You are remembering. In those hours, dreams shift. Many report visions, encounters, teachings, or strange synchronicities tied to the hour of their awakening. Some remember their beloved dead. Some feel a presence. Some rise with a single word echoing through their awareness. Too clear to be a dream, too gentle to be the mind. This is the divine returning not to impress you, but to instruct you. If only you would stay still, if only you would not dismiss it. When the soul has wandered through the night in the astral fields, it often returns with messages, impressions, fragments of the deeper self. But if the body is restless, if the mind is skeptical, it brushes these away like morning dew from a window. I tell you, those dewdrops are divine. You once knew this. In childhood, perhaps, when dreams felt more real than days, when you sensed beings around you no one else acknowledged. That was no fantasy. That was spiritual sensitivity unspoiled by logic. When you rise at 3 a.m., it is as if the soul has just stepped back through the veil and wants, desperately, to deliver what it saw. But the mind resists. The ego says, sleep. The phone beckons. The moment vanishes. And with it, the blessing. But now you know. Now you can sit up in that silence. You can place your palms together and say, I welcome what my soul has seen. I remember what the world forgets. Let the unseen speak. You are not just a human waking at 3 a.m. You are a soul returning to the edge of God, with fragments of heaven still clinging to your aura. Do not shake them off. Let them cover you. Remember this. The night is not the absence of light. It is the intimacy of it. When all outer distractions fade, the soul's lamp is seen more clearly. In those hours, God is nearer, not because he changes, but because you do. You become quiet enough to feel him. So if the hour calls you again, rise like a soul summoned. Say, the body slept, but I did not forget. The soul wandered, and now it returns with gifts. I am ready to receive. And then be still. Breathe. Let the remembrance rise. Even if no words come, even if no vision is seen, the peace itself is the presence. This is why you wake, not to worry, not to toss and turn, but to remember that you were never only body, never only thought. You are soul, and the soul is always in communion with God. My beloved, if the divine is truly calling in the silent hours, why do so many turn away? Why do so many hear the summons but ignore its sweetness? The answer lies in the ancient web of Maya, that power of cosmic delusion which clothes the soul in forgetfulness and binds it to the play of matter. Maya is not evil, it is purposeful. It creates the dream so that the dreamer may one day wake. But when the soul begins to stir at 3 a.m., Maya does not yield its hold easily. It sends the whisper, go back to sleep. You need rest. It offers the glow of your device, the pull of your thoughts, the weight of your old fears. It says, there is nothing here. This silence is empty. And because the world has trained you to obey the noise, you believe it. But I say to you now, do not believe the first voice you hear in that moment. Believe the second. The second voice is softer. It does not argue. It does not shout. It waits. It simply says, I am here. That is God's voice. Not dramatic, not theatrical, but deeply still. Stillness is his signature. Why do most ignore the call? Because they have been taught to fear the silence. They have been taught that waking without reason is a problem, not a blessing. They have been told that everything sacred must be loud, must be grand, must be scheduled. But the soul knows better. the soul remembers that God comes in whispers. Even among the spiritually inclined, many miss the moment. They look for signs in the sky, in the stars, in the scriptures, and forget that the greatest sign is the moment you wake and the air is thick with presence. Do not wait for visions or voices. Pay attention to the vibration of the hour. It speaks with a purity the ego cannot fake. In truth, most people are not afraid of darkness. They are afraid of what the darkness reveals. In the brightness of day, we can hide behind activity. But at 3 a.m., there is nowhere to hide. The ego shrinks and the soul becomes visible. And that, though liberating, can be frightening. For to meet the soul is to remember all that you are and all that you are not. I have seen many students feel this moment and flee from it. They tell me, I felt something. It was too much. I turned on the light. Yes, my child, you felt yourself. The inner light is powerful, and Maya will always try to distract you from it. You must choose in that moment. Will you reach for your phone or your prayer beads? Will you return to dreaming or will you rise into awakening? Repeat this now with me. I will not fear the silence. I will not flee from the light. When the veil thins, I will be present. You are not losing sleep. You are gaining spirit, but only if you meet the moment with awareness. Do not condemn yourself if you have missed this before. Maya is strong, but the soul is stronger still. Each time you wake at 3 a.m., you are being given another chance, another opportunity to rise above illusion and meet your maker in stillness. Understand this. The divine does not force, he invites, but he invites again and again. Because your soul belongs to him, and he will call as long as it takes for you to remember. So now you know why most ignore the call, but you are not most. You are among the few who are ready to answer, not with words, but with stillness, with devotion, with presence. The next time the hour wakes you, do not ask, why now? Ask instead, what do you want to show me, Lord? How may I serve you in this hour? What do you wish me to remember? And then simply be as a candle, silent, still, but burning with God's presence. And now, my beloved soul, let me tell you what this awakening truly is. It is not simply a message. It is not merely a visit. It is an invitation to return to the truth of who you are and why you came. When the divine disturbs your sleep, he is not interrupting your life. He is reminding you of it. The world has trained you to believe that your destiny is shaped by your choices, your ambitions, your efforts. But the awakened soul knows true destiny is shaped by alignment, not alignment with desire, but alignment with divine will. And the 3 a.m. hour is a sacred moment of such realignment, a spiritual reset point. You may ask, what am I being invited to? I will answer you. You are being invited to remember your mission. The soul came here not to gather things, not to chase pleasures, not to win arguments or accumulate applause. The soul came here to love God and reflect his light. That is all, and that is everything. When you wake at 3 a.m., it is not because something is wrong. It is because something is righting itself. The soul, sensing its misalignment, rises to reattune. This is why so many feel emotional at that hour. Tears come, memories rise, regrets surface, but these are not punishments. They are purifications. Your inner compass is trying to find true north again. You are being invited to heal, to release that which burdens your vibration, to let go of the story you keep telling yourself about why you are stuck, small, afraid. God is saying, give that to me. I will carry it, but only if you hand it over. You are being invited to relinquish the ego's agenda and accept the soul's assignment. Sometimes the invitation will come with clarity. You may hear a phrase, see an image, feel a pull. Other times it will be only silence. But even that silence is coated with guidance. Do not judge the moment by what it gives. Judge it by what it stirs. The invitation may be to forgive, to begin again, to serve, to meditate, to release a hidden resentment, to make peace with your past, to speak truthfully, to listen more, or simply to love deeper. But always the invitation is this: come back to me, come back to the center, come back to who you truly are. Pause now, breathe in deeply, Hold your breath for a moment and then exhale slowly. Feel the stillness it creates. In that stillness is your invitation. No words, no images, just presence. Let that presence work on you. That is the divine. So when you wake again at 3 a.m., do not just acknowledge the moment. Accept it. Welcome it. Whisper, I receive the invitation. Whatever you are showing me, I welcome. I choose the path of alignment. This is the turning point, dear soul, from confusion to clarity, from resistance to surrender, from being haunted by 3 a.m. to being healed by it. You may think it is just a moment in the night, but in truth, it is the beginning of a new day, not of your calendar, but of your consciousness. You are not here to survive. You are here to awaken. Beloved, now that you understand the sacredness of this hour, let me take your hand and guide you through it. For it is not enough to awaken. You must learn how to receive the visitor who calls. The moment you open your eyes in the still darkness, a meeting is already underway. Do not waste it. Do not rush it. Do not fear it. This is not a disturbance. It is a divine appointment. First, resist the old habit. Do not reach for the phone. Do not flick on the light. Do not scroll through illusions. These things were designed to dim your soul's sensitivity. They were not made for moments like this. When you wake at 3 a.m., you are in the temple of the inner self. Do not pollute it with noise. Instead, stay where you are. Place your hand upon your heart. Breathe in slowly through the nose, drawing the breath not just into the lungs, but deep into the spine. Then breathe out through the mouth as though releasing everything false. Do this 3 times slowly. With each exhale, let the body relax. Let the mind still. Let the soul rise. Now sit up slowly. Keep your eyes closed if you can. Spine straight, chest open, not rigid, but reverent. You are before the altar of the infinite. Focus gently at the point between the eyebrows, the spiritual eye. Let all your awareness gather there. That is the doorway. That is the antenna. Now say within you, or aloud if you are alone, you have awakened me, Lord. I am listening. I did not wake myself. My soul was stirred. Speak through the silence. Then wait, not with anxiety, but with holy expectancy. You may feel nothing, or everything, a warmth, a stillness, a tear, a memory, a knowing. Do not analyze it. Do not try to control it. Simply be present. This is where the sacred meeting unfolds, not with thunder, not with spectacle, but in deep presence. Sometimes the divine communicates through feeling more than form. A peace may descend on you like a robe, or a phrase may rise that you needed to hear, or perhaps only breath, deep and sacred, washing you from within. You are not required to understand the moment. You are only required to receive it. You may then ask a soul question, not from ego, but from surrender. What is it I need to know? What part of me needs healing? What do you want to do through me today? Ask gently, ask once, and then listen. You may not hear an answer now, but the act of asking opens a channel. Answers will come in the days, the hours, or even in dreams to follow. Trust the process. If emotion rises, let it. Do not suppress it. That is energy moving. That is karma dissolving. That is spirit working through your being. If fear rises, breathe deeper. Return to the mantra, I am safe in God. This silence is not empty. It is full of His presence. I surrender to the light within. This is the moment of meeting. The veil is thin. The soul is exposed. The Father draws near. Even if you return to sleep afterward, you will not be the same. Something will have shifted, subtly, beautifully, permanently. You answered the knock. You received the visitor. You honored the soul's hour. And now when others ask why you rise in the dark, you will not say insomnia. You will say, because the beloved calls to me in the quiet. Because the soul remembers what the ego forgets. Because at 3 a.m., I meet my maker in silence. You are ready now, not just to wake, but to receive. Not just to notice, but to honor. The next time it happens, you will know what to do. You will no longer be startled. You will be still. Now that you know how to meet the hour, I shall offer you what the awakened yogi carries into this holy time. Mantras and soul questions, simple yet saturated with power. For the soul in that hour is not seeking information, it is seeking alignment, and the right words, spoken with devotion, can unlock 1,000 doors within. Let us begin with sacred sound. You do not need to chant loudly. Even a whisper in the stillness of your heart becomes thunder in the inner worlds. Say slowly, reverently, with full attention. Reveal thyself, O light of my soul. Let each word ripple through the silence like a prayer woven in breath. Repeat it again. Reveal thyself, O light of my soul. Do not rush. Let the syllables fall like drops from the eternal spring. This mantra awakens the divine memory within. It is not a request, it is a recognition, a soul returning to the mirror and asking to see its true face. Another sacred mantra, short but boundless, I am thine, be thou mine. Say this not with demand, but with longing, not with doubt, but with surrender. The soul says it to God every day in silence, even when the lips do not move. It is the universal language of divine belonging. Repeat it with me now. I am thine, be thou mine. I am thine, be thou mine. Let this become the rhythm of your breath. Inhale with I am thine. Exhale with be thou mine. When your heart is quiet and your breath has softened, speak this third invocation. What wilt thou have me do? This is not a question of strategy, but of soul surrender. Ask not what will serve your desire, but what will serve your destiny. Ask not for comfort, but for clarity. Do not ask this question hoping for immediate answers. Ask it to offer the throne of your life to God. Ask it to remember that your soul is not lost, it is assigned. In that space you may journal, not with the mind's noise, but with the soul's whisper. Write your soul's questions in the dark. Where am I out of alignment? What truth have I ignored? What does my higher self wish to become? You will be surprised in time how answers begin to rise. Not always then and there, but in the hours and days that follow. The asking prepares the vessel. The silence draws down the nectar. This is what the saints do. This is what I have done, night after night. Not every 3 a.m. hour is dramatic, but every hour is divine, and the soul that meets it with reverence shall not remain unchanged. If your eyes are too tired, simply lie still and inwardly repeat, God, God, God. Let his name be your lullaby. Let it be your shield. Let it be your rising sun in the middle of the night. And if your tears come, let them. They are not weakness. They are the soul's language, spoken when the voice no longer suffices. They wash away the dust of forgetfulness and reveal the golden self beneath. Say this now, before we continue. I am willing to hear what I once feared. I open the gate within. This hour is holy and I am here. These devotional practices are not rituals, they are remembrances. They are not techniques to control God, but invitations to receive him. Carry them in your heart, whisper them in your breath. Let them become the way you meet the sacred hour every time it calls. Now, beloved soul, let me reveal a secret long held in the inner temples. You do not wake alone. You do not rise into silence unattended. When your eyes open at 3 a.m., you step not into emptiness, but into a room already filled, with presence, with watchers, with the subtle vibrations of those who guide, guard, and awaken. Yes, you may feel alone, but I tell you in truth, you are being visited. There are beings who do not sleep. Saints who, in their compassion, have vowed to watch over the progress of souls still traveling through the dream. These luminous ones are drawn not to noise, but to sincerity. They do not come when you perform. They come when you surrender. At 3 a.m., the veil thins, not only between you and God, but between you and the masters. They are the silent ones. They do not announce themselves. They bring no storm, but their presence, it changes the vibration of the room. You feel peace where you expected fear. You feel tears when you thought there would be only fatigue. That is them. Sometimes it is your guru. Sometimes a departed loved one whose love was strong enough to break through the veil. Sometimes a great soul, unknown to your mind, but long known to your spirit, comes to remind you you are not forgotten. They visit because you are waking up, not just in body, but in soul. And where there is soul awakening, divine company gathers. You may not see them, you may not hear them, but you will feel them in the soft silence that falls after a prayer, in the sudden clarity that enters your heart, in the strength you did not know you had. These are signs that the watchers are near. Do not seek them with your eyes, seek them with your stillness. Say within, Masters of light, if you are here, I am ready. Angels of the sacred hour, guide my soul. I listen for your breath in the silence. You do not need to fear these visits. They are not intrusions, they are gifts. Sent not because you are broken, but because you are being rebuilt. They come to install divine memory, to activate your higher path, to align you with the will of the infinite. If you have ever felt watched during these hours, not with fear, but with inexplicable warmth, you have already experienced it. If your body has stilled for no reason, or your tears have come in prayer with no words to explain them, you have already been visited. These are not fantasies. These are moments when the soul receives reinforcements. And yes, sometimes, very rarely, the watchers deliver a word. A single word, repeated in your mind as if from nowhere. A name, a phrase, a scripture, a line of wisdom. Cherish it. It is not random. It is a seed. Plant it in the soil of your devotion, and it will bloom in time. I have seen this in my own life. I have felt the presence of my guru, Sri Yukteswarji, in the early hours, guiding me not through loud instruction, but through radiant silence. And in that silence, I knew what to do. So will you. Say now with me, I welcome the light bearers. I open my spirit to the guidance of the holy ones. May my room be a temple. May my breath be a bell. May my heart be a door. These visits are not signs of your superiority. They are signs of your readiness. The 3 a.m. hour is not for everyone, but for those whose souls have cried long enough, who have searched deep enough, the divine sends companions. So if you rise again tonight, light a candle in your heart. Welcome the unseen. Sit in silence and listen, not just to what is said, but to what is being transmitted. The soul is never alone. The 3 a.m. knock is never random. And you, my beloved, are being watched not by spies, but by saints. And now, dear soul, we come to the sacred seal, the final truth, the final choice. You are no longer asleep. You are no longer ignorant of the meaning behind your 3 a.m. awakening. The veil has lifted. The invitation is in your hands. The question remains, will you accept this as your new covenant with the divine? This is not a fleeting phenomenon. This is not about fixing sleep patterns or chasing mysteries. This is about a divine appointment that repeats until it is received. God has knocked on your soul's door, not once but many times. Each time you wake at that hour, he is asking, will you let me in? Will you make this hour holy? Will you meet me where the world sleeps? This is a call to live not as a body governed by habit, but as a soul governed by light. It is a call to reshape your mornings, not through routine, but through reverence. To redefine your nights, not as rest alone, but as reunion. You may say, but I am tired. Yes, I know. The path is not one of comfort, it is one of transformation. But listen, 10 minutes of divine communion at 3 a.m. is more restorative than 10 hours of restless sleep. For in that time, the soul drinks directly from the fountain of God's peace. You may say, but I am afraid. Then bring your fear into the light. Let it burn in the fire of stillness. Let the divine presence displace it, not with force, but with fullness. You may say, but what if nothing happens? My beloved, the sacred does not perform. It pervades. Do not measure the moment. Measure your presence within it. Accept now this holy hour as part of your dharma, your soul's sacred duty, not for performance, not for proof, but for union. From this day forward, when 3 a.m. finds you, you will not resist. You will rise, not always in body, but always in awareness. Even if you stay lying down, you will turn inward. You will greet the presence. You will speak, "Beloved, I am here. This hour is yours. Let thy will move through me." This is not just a spiritual practice. It is a reorientation of identity. You are not the one who sleeps. You are the one who remembers while the world sleeps. You are not the one who dreams. You are the one who returns from dreams carrying divine light. And let this be your final vow. Place your hand upon your heart and say with me now, "I am awake in God. When He calls, I answer. When the world sleeps, I rise. When the hour is silent, my soul speaks. I accept this hour as holy. I accept this hour as mine." Let this be the seal upon your consciousness. Not a theory, not a ritual, but a sacred reordering of your life. If even once you respond to the 3 a.m. hour in stillness, in reverence, in listening, you will change your destiny. For what is destiny, if not the soul finally aligning with the call it has heard since the beginning? And now, my beloved, go in peace, but go not as you were. Go as one who knows. Go as one who remembers. When the next 3 a.m. comes, you will not fear it. You will meet it. As a lover meets the gaze of the beloved, in silence, in surrender, in divine certainty. Close your eyes now. Take a breath. Feel the hush of that sacred hour already blooming within you. Say this final affirmation with me. I do not wake in darkness. I wake in God. You cannot have a deep, intimate relationship with someone you only call when you need something specific. This is true in human relationships, and it's absolutely true in divine relationship. Yet millions of spiritual seekers are trying to build relationships with dozens of different gods, wondering why they never feel that profound connection they're longing for. Today, I'm going to show you why spiritual intimacy requires spiritual fidelity, and why the very approach that seems to give you more divine options might actually be keeping you spiritually empty. What I'm about to share may challenge everything you've been taught about modern spirituality, but it comes from decades of direct communion with the divine and witnessing the struggles of countless sincere souls who felt abandoned by the very gods they were trying so hard to please. In the next 45 minutes, you're going to discover the profound spiritual law that governs divine relationship, why splitting your devotion actually splits your spiritual power, how to recognize if you've fallen into the trap of spiritual collecting, and most importantly, how to channel all your devotional energy toward the one relationship that can fulfill every spiritual need you have. You'll learn the difference between acknowledging many paths and dividing your devotional heart, how the greatest saints throughout history approached divine relationship, and the specific practices that transform scattered prayers into focused spiritual communion that actually gets divine response. This isn't about religious dogma or limiting your spiritual exploration. This is about the fundamental laws of consciousness and how divine relationship actually works. By the end of this teaching, you'll understand why the path to all gods leads through deep relationship with one God, and how this understanding can revolutionize your entire spiritual life. Now, I know this message might feel challenging, especially in our modern spiritual culture that encourages us to sample from every tradition, to collect beautiful practices and inspiring deities, like we're building a spiritual buffet. There's nothing wrong with appreciating the beauty in all traditions. I've always taught that truth appears in many forms. But there's a crucial difference between appreciating universal truth and dividing your devotional heart. Many sincere seekers have fallen into what I call spiritual collecting, accumulating gods and practices without developing the deep, transformative relationship that actually awakens divine communion. I've counseled thousands of souls who felt spiritually scattered, who prayed to many deities but never felt heard by any of them. They had altars covered with different images. They knew prayers in multiple languages. They attended ceremonies from various traditions, yet they felt more spiritually hungry than ever. The problem wasn't with their sincerity or their open hearts. The problem was that they were trying to develop many shallow relationships instead of one deep one. They were asking different gods to meet different needs, never allowing any single divine relationship to become profound enough to meet all their needs. This scattering of devotional energy creates what I call spiritual static. Like trying to tune into multiple radio stations at once, you hear noise instead of clear transmission. Your prayers become weak because your focus is divided. Your spiritual energy becomes diffused instead of concentrated. Today, We'll explore 4 essential truths about divine relationship that will transform how you approach your spiritual life. First, I'll reveal the spiritual law of devotional focus. Why concentrated love creates spiritual magnetism, while divided attention creates spiritual weakness. This isn't about limiting yourself. It's about understanding how divine communion actually functions. Then, we'll discover the profound difference between the path of many gods and the path through one God to the source of all gods. You'll learn why every authentic tradition teaches focused devotion as the fastest route to divine realization, and how you can honor universal truth while maintaining devotional integrity. Next, I'll show you how to recognize if you've fallen into the trap of spiritual collecting, and more importantly, how to transform scattered practices into focused devotion without losing the beauty and wisdom you've gained from different traditions. Finally, we'll explore the practice of devotional consolidation, how to choose your primary divine relationship, and how to channel all your spiritual energy toward the deepest communion possible. This is where the real transformation happens. But here's what might surprise you most. When you develop true intimacy with one expression of the divine, you don't lose connection to universal truth. You gain access to it. Through deep relationship with one God, you discover the source that appears as all gods. What we'll discover today isn't about religious exclusivity or spiritual limitation. It's about the profound difference between spiritual window shopping and spiritual marriage. One keeps you always seeking, the other brings you home to the divine relationship your soul has been longing for. So prepare to examine your own devotional life with new eyes and discover why the ancient teaching, many paths, one goal, might be the most misunderstood spiritual truth of our time. The spiritual law of devotional focus. My dear friend, let me begin by sharing with you one of the most fundamental laws governing spiritual life, the law of devotional focus. Just as a magnifying glass can concentrate sunlight into a flame powerful enough to start a fire, concentrated devotional energy can ignite the flame of divine communion in your heart. But scatter that same light, and it becomes too weak to kindle even the smallest spark. This principle operates whether you understand it or not, whether you believe it or not. It's as reliable as the law of gravity, as predictable as the rising sun. When your devotional energy is concentrated, it creates what I call spiritual magnetism. A force so powerful it draws divine response, like iron draws a magnet. When that same energy is scattered across multiple objects of worship, it loses this magnetic power entirely. Most people approach spirituality like they approach a restaurant menu. They want a little of this god for protection, a little of that goddess for abundance, another deity for healing, and yet another for guidance. They think this gives them more spiritual insurance, more divine coverage. But what they don't realize is that they're actually creating spiritual interference that blocks every prayer they make. Let me share with you a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. Years ago, a sincere devotee came to me in great distress. She had been praying for 5 years for help with a serious illness, but felt like her prayers were disappearing into empty space. When I asked about her spiritual practice, she proudly showed me her altar. It contained images of 33 different deities from various traditions. I pray to different gods for different things, she explained. I asked Ganesha to remove obstacles, Lakshmi for healing abundance, Jesus for compassion, Buddha for peace, Kali for strength, and Hanuman for courage. Surely one of them will help me. I gently explained to her that she was like someone trying to have conversations with 33 people at once. Nobody could hear her clearly because her attention was too divided. Her devotional energy was so scattered that none of these divine relationships had become strong enough to carry her prayers to their destination. Together, we identified which divine form had always attracted her most naturally. It was Divine Mother in the form of the divine feminine principle. I guided her to focus all her devotional energy on this one relationship. Within 3 months, she experienced the profound spiritual communion she had been seeking for years, and her healing journey began in earnest. This transformation didn't happen because Divine Mother was more powerful than the other deities she had been praying to. It happened because she finally gave her devotional energy the focus it needed to create real spiritual connection. You see, the mind has a natural tendency to scatter, to sample, to collect experiences rather than deepen them. In our modern spiritual marketplace, this tendency has become almost epidemic. People treat spirituality like shopping. They want to try every product, collect every experience, sample every tradition. But divine relationship doesn't work like consumer choice. It works like marriage. Think about human relationships for a moment. Imagine someone who tries to maintain romantic relationships with dozens of people simultaneously, calling each one only when they need something specific. They call one person when they need emotional support, another when they want fun, another when they need practical help, and so on. How deep could any of these relationships become? How much trust could develop? How much intimacy would be possible? This person might have many acquaintances, but they would never experience the profound connection that comes from committed, focused love. They would always be spiritually lonely, always searching for something deeper, never understanding that their approach itself is preventing the very intimacy they're seeking. This is exactly what happens in spiritual life when we scatter our devotion across multiple deities. We create many spiritual acquaintanceships, but never develop the intimate divine relationship that can actually transform our consciousness. The ancient teachings from every tradition understand this principle. Jesus taught his disciples to focus their devotion entirely on the relationship with the Father through him. Muhammad guided his followers to concentrate their worship solely on Allah. Buddha taught his students to take refuge in the three jewels with complete commitment. Krishna instructed Arjuna to abandon all other supports and surrender completely to the divine self within. None of these great teachers were being narrow or exclusive. They understood that concentrated devotional energy is the fastest, most reliable path to divine realization. They knew that trying to develop multiple divine relationships simultaneously prevents any of them from becoming profound enough to provide real spiritual transformation. But here's where many people get confused. They think focusing their devotion means rejecting other traditions or claiming their chosen deity is the only real God. This is a fundamental misunderstanding. Concentrating your devotional energy doesn't mean denying universal truth. It means accessing universal truth through the most direct path available. When you develop a truly intimate relationship with one expression of the divine, something miraculous happens. You begin to recognize that same divine essence appearing in all forms, all traditions, all genuine spiritual expressions. The love you develop for your chosen deity becomes so pure, so expansive, that it naturally embraces all expressions of divine love. It's like learning to play one musical instrument extremely well versus learning to play 20 instruments poorly. When you master one instrument, you understand music itself. When you scatter your attention across 20 instruments, you never develop the depth of understanding that reveals the universal principles underlying all music. This is why every authentic tradition teaches what appears to be exclusive devotion, but actually leads to inclusive understanding. The path to the universal runs through the particular. The way to all gods leads through intimate relationship with one God. The devotional energy you possess is precious and limited. Like any other energy, it can be concentrated for maximum effect or scattered until it becomes ineffective. When you try to maintain devotional relationships with multiple deities, you're dividing this precious energy until none of your spiritual connections become strong enough to carry you into the profound communion your soul is seeking. This doesn't mean you can't appreciate the beauty in other traditions. It doesn't mean you have to reject the wisdom you've found in different teachings. It means recognizing that appreciation and devotional commitment are two different things, and that real spiritual progress requires the courage to commit your heart completely to one divine relationship, one door to the infinite temple. Now, my beloved friend, let me share with you a profound truth that resolves one of the greatest spiritual confusions of our time. There is an infinite difference between worshiping many gods and discovering the one divine that appears as many gods. Understanding this difference will transform your entire approach to spiritual life. Imagine a magnificent temple with 100 different doors. From the outside, it appears that each door leads to a different sanctuary, a different deity, a different spiritual experience. Seekers gather outside, arguing about which door is best, which deity is most powerful, which path is most authentic. Some people try to enter through multiple doors simultaneously, exhausting themselves running from entrance to entrance. But here's what they don't realize. All the doors lead to the same infinite sanctuary within. The temple has many entrances but one sacred center. The wise devotee chooses one door and walks through it completely, discovering that this single entrance leads to the same divine presence that all the other doors were also designed to reveal. This is the secret that every authentic spiritual tradition understands, but that modern spiritual seekers often miss. When Jesus said, "No one comes to the Father except through me," he wasn't claiming to be the only valid spiritual path. He was revealing the universal principle that divine realization comes through complete commitment to one authentic doorway into divine consciousness. When Krishna taught Arjuna to surrender everything to the divine self, he wasn't promoting Hindu exclusivity. He was demonstrating that total devotional commitment to one expression of the infinite divine is the royal road to experiencing that same divine in all its forms. When Muhammad taught complete submission to Allah, when Buddha taught refuge in the triple gem, when the ancient rishis taught focused devotion to their chosen deity, they were all pointing to the same profound truth. The infinite is reached through the particular, the universal through the focused, the all through the one. I learned this principle directly through my own spiritual journey. In my early seeking, I was fascinated by all the different expressions of divine truth I encountered. I studied various traditions, practiced different techniques, appreciated the beauty in many forms of worship. But my real transformation began when I felt divinely called to pour all my devotional energy into my relationship with Krishna. This wasn't because I thought Krishna was better than other divine forms. It was because I recognized that my soul had a natural affinity for this particular doorway into divine consciousness. The more deeply I entered into this one relationship, the more clearly I could see the same divine consciousness expressing itself through all traditions, all saints, all authentic spiritual paths. Through intimate communion with Krishna, I didn't become more narrow, I became more universal. The deeper my particular devotion grew, the more inclusive my spiritual understanding became. I could recognize Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, Divine Mother's love, and Allah's mercy as different faces of the same infinite divine reality I was experiencing through my chosen relationship. This is the great paradox of authentic spirituality. Limitation leads to limitlessness. By limiting your devotional focus to one divine relationship, you gain access to unlimited divine experience. By trying to relate to all gods equally, you actually limit yourself to surface experiences with many, rather than deep communion with the divine itself. Think of it like learning a language. You could spend years learning a few basic phrases in dozens of different languages, or you could become completely fluent in one language. The person who masters one language deeply can communicate profound ideas, express complex emotions, share intimate thoughts. The person who knows fragments of many languages can only have superficial conversations, no matter how many languages they've sampled. Divine relationship works the same way. Surface familiarity with many deities allows only shallow spiritual experiences. Deep, intimate relationship with one divine form opens the door to profound communion with the divine essence that appears as all forms. This is why every tradition that has produced genuine saints and realized souls teaches focused devotion as the primary practice. Ramakrishna, one of the greatest spiritual masters of modern times, explored various traditions and practices, but his foundation was always his intense, intimate relationship with Divine Mother Kali. Through this one profound connection, he was able to experience and validate the truth in all other spiritual paths. Saint Francis didn't scatter his devotion across multiple divine relationships. He poured his entire heart into his love for Christ. Yet this focused devotion opened his consciousness so completely that he could see divine presence in every creature, every element of nature, every human being he encountered. Rumi's ecstatic poetry flowed from his totally committed love relationship with the divine beloved. He didn't dilute his devotion by trying to love many different divine forms. He channeled all his spiritual passion into one transcendent relationship, which then revealed the divine beloved appearing everywhere. These great souls understood that you cannot have intimate relationship with an abstract concept or a committee of deities. Intimate relationship requires a focus, a form, a particular doorway through which infinite love can flow. Once that doorway is fully open through complete devotional commitment, the infinite love that flows through it reveals itself as the source of all gods, all paths, all authentic spiritual experience. This is why the teaching, many paths, one goal, is so often misunderstood. People think it means you should walk all paths simultaneously, Sample all traditions equally. Divide your devotional energy among multiple approaches. But the true meaning is that many different focus paths lead to the same ultimate realization, that the divine appearing as your chosen deity is the same divine appearing as everyone else's chosen deity. The goal is one, but the path must be focused to reach that goal. You can climb a mountain from many different sides, but you must choose one trail and follow it completely if you want to reach the summit. Trying to walk multiple trails at once means you'll wander in circles at the base of the mountain forever. When you choose one divine relationship and develop it completely, you don't lose access to universal truth. You gain the key that unlocks it. You discover that the love flowing through your particular devotional relationship is the same love that flows through all authentic spiritual connections. The peace you find in communion with your chosen deity is the same peace that mystics of every tradition have discovered through their focus practice. This is the great secret that transforms spiritual seeking into spiritual finding. The infinite divine that you're seeking through many scattered relationships is fully present and available through one committed relationship. Choose your door, walk through it completely, and discover the infinite temple that was always waiting within. Recognizing spiritual collecting versus authentic practice. My dear friend, now we must examine honestly whether your spiritual approach has become what I call spiritual collecting, the unconscious habit of accumulating divine relationships without developing the depth that creates real transformation. This is one of the most subtle traps on the spiritual path, because it disguises itself as open-mindedness and spiritual sophistication. Spiritual collecting feels very different from authentic spiritual practice, though the difference can be hard to recognize from the inside. Let me share the signs that indicate when spiritual exploration has crossed the line into devotional scattering. The first sign is what I call spiritual restlessness. You find yourself constantly seeking new practices, new deities, new techniques, but never feeling satisfied with what you already have. There's always another tradition to explore, another god to add to your practice, another method that promises to be the missing piece you've been looking for. I once counseled a sincere seeker who had spent 20 years collecting spiritual practices. She had studied with teachers from 12 different traditions, learned to chant in 8 different languages, and maintained altars to deities from 6 different cultures. Yet she felt more spiritually empty than when she had started her journey. "I know so much about spirituality," she told me with tears in her eyes, "but I don't feel like I know God at all. I have all these beautiful practices, all these inspiring teachings, but there's no intimacy, no real connection. I feel like I'm standing outside a banquet, reading menus from dozens of restaurants, but never actually eating anything nourishing." This is the spiritual hunger that comes from collecting rather than committing. You accumulate spiritual experiences without digesting them, gather spiritual tools without mastering any of them, meet many divine forms without developing intimate relationship with any of them. The second sign of spiritual collecting is what I call spiritual insurance thinking, the belief that having more divine relationships gives you better spiritual protection or more chances of getting your prayers answered. This approach treats deities like spiritual specialists. You go to one for wealth, another for health, another for relationships, another for protection. But divine relationship doesn't work like specialist medicine. The divine is not compartmentalized. When you develop true intimacy with any authentic expression of divine consciousness, that relationship can meet all your spiritual needs. You don't need a different God for each area of your life, any more than you need a different spouse for each of your emotional needs. A third sign is spiritual ADHD, inability to maintain focused practice with any single approach for extended periods. You might practice Buddhist meditation for a few months, then switch to Hindu devotional chanting, then try Christian contemplative prayer, then explore shamanic practices, always moving on before any practice has had time to work its transformative magic. Spiritual transformation requires what I call devotional maturation. The willingness to stay with one practice, one relationship, one approach long enough for it to change you at the deepest levels. This is uncomfortable for the mind, which prefers the excitement of novelty to the sometimes challenging work of deepening. The fourth sign is what I call spiritual comparison shopping, constantly evaluating different divine forms and spiritual approaches to see which one offers the best spiritual deal. This consumer mindset prevents the surrender and commitment that authentic devotion requires. Divine relationship cannot be built through comparison shopping because it requires the very opposite, the willingness to stop shopping and commit completely to one relationship. You cannot develop intimacy with someone while you're constantly evaluating whether you might prefer someone else. Now, let me be very clear. There's nothing wrong with spiritual exploration, especially in the early stages of your journey. Learning about different traditions, appreciating various expressions of divine truth, and discovering what naturally attracts your soul are all valuable parts of spiritual development. The problem arises when exploration becomes an end in itself rather than a means to finding your authentic path. When spiritual seeking becomes a way of avoiding the commitment and surrender that real devotional relationship requires, I've observed that people often fall into spiritual collecting for several understandable reasons. Sometimes it's fear of commitment, the worry that choosing one path means missing out on something better. Sometimes it's spiritual pride, the ego's satisfaction in knowing about many traditions and appearing spiritually sophisticated. Sometimes it's genuine confusion about how spiritual growth actually works. Our culture teaches us that more choices are always better, that sampling widely is more intelligent than committing deeply. But spiritual life operates by different laws than consumer culture. The transformation from spiritual collecting to authentic practice requires what I call devotional courage, the willingness to risk missing out on other spiritual experiences in order to gain the profound transformation that comes from complete commitment to one path. This doesn't mean you have to reject everything you've learned from different traditions. The key is learning to integrate valuable insights into your primary practice rather than maintaining parallel relationships with multiple spiritual approaches. For example, you might find Buddhist mindfulness techniques helpful while maintaining your primary devotional relationship with Christ. You might appreciate the philosophical insights of Vedanta while channeling your devotional energy toward Divine Mother. You might honor the ethical teachings of all traditions while focusing your worship on Allah. The difference is that you're using insights from other traditions to deepen your primary relationship rather than trying to maintain equal relationships with multiple divine forms. You're translating valuable spiritual principles into the language of your chosen path rather than trying to speak multiple spiritual languages simultaneously. This integration requires discrimination, the wisdom to distinguish between universal spiritual principles that can enhance any practice and specific devotional methods that work best when practiced exclusively. Compassion, mindfulness, ethical living, and surrender are universal principles that can strengthen any spiritual path. But the specific focus of your prayers, the particular divine form you visualize, and the primary relationship through which you seek divine communion need consistency to develop depth. The practice of authentic spirituality means choosing quality over quantity, depth over breadth, commitment over collection. It means having the courage to say, "This is my path, this is my primary divine relationship, and I will develop it completely rather than maintaining shallow connections to many paths." This choice doesn't close doors. It opens the one door that leads to infinite spiritual experience. When you stop collecting and start committing, you discover that one authentic divine relationship contains all the spiritual nourishment your soul has been seeking through scattered exploration. The practice of devotional consolidation. Now, my beloved friend, we come to the most practical and transformative aspect of our teaching today: how to actually consolidate your scattered spiritual practices into one focused, powerful devotional relationship that can carry you all the way to divine realization. This process of devotional consolidation is both an art and a science. It requires inner honesty, spiritual courage, and practical wisdom. But when done correctly, it transforms spiritual seeking into spiritual finding, spiritual hunger into spiritual satisfaction, spiritual confusion into spiritual clarity. The first step in devotional consolidation is what I call authentic attraction assessment. You must look honestly at all the divine forms and spiritual approaches you've been drawn to and identify which one creates the strongest natural resonance in your heart. This isn't about choosing the most popular deity or the most sophisticated tradition. It's about recognizing which divine relationship feels most like coming home. Sit quietly and bring to mind each divine form you've been attracted to. Notice what happens in your heart when you contemplate each one. Which image or name creates the strongest feeling of love, peace, or recognition? Which tradition's practices feel most natural to you? Which spiritual relationship makes you feel most yourself, most authentic, most willing to surrender completely? This authentic attraction is not mere personal preference. It's your soul recognizing its natural affinity for a particular doorway into divine consciousness. Trust this recognition. It's far more reliable than intellectual analysis or cultural conditioning. I remember guiding a devotee through this process who had been practicing elements of Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism simultaneously for many years. As we explored her authentic attractions, she realized that despite her intellectual fascination with various traditions, her heart consistently returned to Christ. The image of Jesus, the practice of Christian prayer, and the feeling of divine love through Christ's relationship created the strongest spiritual response in her consciousness. Once she recognized this authentic attraction, we worked together to consolidate all her spiritual practices around this central relationship. She didn't abandon the valuable insights she had gained from other traditions, but she translated them into Christian language and integrated them into her Christ-centered practice. The meditation techniques she had learned became forms of Christian contemplation. The compassion practices became expressions of Christ's love. The philosophical insights became ways of understanding Christ consciousness. Everything was drawn into and strengthened her primary divine relationship rather than competing with it. The second step in devotional consolidation is what I call practice integration. This means taking all the scattered spiritual techniques you've been using and finding ways to channel them toward your primary divine relationship. If you've been chanting mantras to different deities, choose mantras that invoke your primary divine form. If you've been practicing various meditation techniques, adapt them to focus on communion with your chosen deity. If you've been reading teachings from multiple traditions, prioritize texts that deepen your understanding of your primary spiritual relationship. This integration process requires creativity and spiritual intelligence. You're not throwing away valuable practices, you're finding ways to use them that strengthen rather than scatter your devotional energy. Every technique becomes a way of deepening your primary divine relationship rather than maintaining parallel spiritual connections. The third step is altar consolidation, creating a physical sacred space that reflects your devotional focus rather than your spiritual collecting. This might mean removing images and symbols that represent scattered spiritual interests and creating a unified sacred space focused on your primary divine relationship. This doesn't mean destroying images or disrespecting other traditions. It means creating a physical environment that supports your devotional concentration rather than encouraging spiritual scattering. You might keep images from other traditions in a separate space where you can appreciate them without having them compete for your devotional attention during your primary spiritual practice. The fourth step is prayer consolidation, channeling all your requests, gratitude, and communication toward your primary divine relationship. Instead of asking different deities for different things, you bring all your needs, concerns, and appreciations to your chosen divine form. This consolidation of prayer is incredibly powerful because it allows your divine relationship to become comprehensive rather than compartmentalized. Your chosen deity becomes your friend, guide, protector, healer, and source of wisdom. Not because that divine form is superior to others, but because you're allowing the relationship to develop the depth and intimacy that makes such complete divine support possible. I always tell my students that the divine is like the sun. The same sun can provide light, warmth, energy for growth, and power for all life's needs. You don't need different suns for different purposes. Similarly, one authentic divine relationship can meet all your spiritual needs when you develop it completely. The fifth step is community consolidation, finding spiritual community and fellowship that supports your primary spiritual path rather than encouraging spiritual scattering. This might mean spending more time with people who share your chosen tradition and less time in spiritual environments that promote the collecting mentality. This doesn't mean becoming narrow or judgmental toward other approaches. It means surrounding yourself with influences that strengthen your devotional commitment rather than constantly tempting you to explore new spiritual options. Throughout this consolidation process, you may experience resistance from your mind, which has become accustomed to the excitement of spiritual variety. You might feel like you're missing out on other spiritual experiences or limiting your spiritual growth. This resistance is natural and temporary. Remember that you're not limiting your spiritual growth. you're focusing it. You're not missing out on divine experience. You're accessing the deep divine experience that scattered attention makes impossible. You're not becoming spiritually narrow, you're becoming spiritually effective. The practice of devotional consolidation requires what I call spiritual faithfulness. The same quality that allows human marriages to deepen into profound intimacy rather than remaining shallow and exciting. Spiritual faithfulness means choosing depth over novelty, commitment over options, intimacy over exploration. As you practice devotional consolidation, you'll discover something wonderful. The divine relationship you thought you were limiting yourself to actually contains infinite depth, infinite variety, infinite capacity to meet every spiritual need you have. You'll find that one authentic divine relationship is like an ocean that you could explore for lifetimes without exhausting its depths. This is the great secret of focused devotion. When you stop trying to relate to many gods superficially, you discover that one divine relationship can give you access to the infinite divine that appears as all gods. Your spiritual life transforms from scattered seeking into profound finding, from spiritual loneliness into divine intimacy, from religious confusion into pure devotional love. My beloved friend, what we've explored today reveals a profound spiritual truth that could revolutionize your entire relationship with the divine. You now understand that concentrated devotional energy creates spiritual magnetism, while scattered attention creates spiritual weakness, that the path to universal divine realization leads through deep particular relationship, and that choosing one primary divine connection doesn't limit your spiritual understanding, it unlocks it. You've learned to recognize the difference between spiritual appreciation and spiritual collecting, and most importantly, you've discovered how to transform scattered devotional practices into focused spiritual communion that creates real divine response. Remember, this isn't about rejecting the beauty in other traditions or becoming spiritually narrow. It's about understanding how divine relationship actually works and applying this wisdom to create the deep spiritual connection your soul has been longing for. The divine is waiting for you to choose the door through which you will enter into complete communion. Every tradition offers an authentic doorway, but you must choose one and walk through it completely if you want to discover the infinite sanctuary within. So carry this truth in your heart. The divine is both one and many, but your devotion must be focused to be powerful. You cannot marry every person you find attractive, and you cannot develop intimate divine relationship by dividing your devotional heart among dozens of deities. Choose the divine form that calls most deeply to your soul, and pour all your love, all your prayers, all your spiritual energy into that one sacred relationship. Through this focused devotion, you'll discover not limitation, but the infinite source that appears as all gods, all paths, all truth. Your spiritual progress isn't measured by how many deities you can name, but by how deeply you can love the one that calls your heart home. Now, once you understand the power of focused devotion, a crucial question arises. How do you actually choose your primary divine relationship? With so many beautiful expressions of the divine available, how do you know which one is truly calling your soul? In my next teaching, I'm going to reveal the ancient method for discovering your personal spiritual path, the specific signs, feelings, and experiences that show you which divine relationship is meant to be yours. This isn't about religious tradition or family background. It's about recognizing the eternal connection your soul has been seeking. I'll share the meditation technique that reveals your natural spiritual inclination, the signs that show you're on your authentic path, and most importantly, how to distinguish between mental preferences and genuine soul calling. This discovery could save you decades of spiritual searching. Because once you find your true divine relationship, everything changes. Your prayers become powerful, your spiritual practices become transformative, and that deep communion you've been seeking finally becomes your daily reality. So click on that video now, because your soul is ready to come home to the divine relationship it's been seeking through all these scattered prayers and practices. I'll be waiting there to guide you to the recognition that will change everything. Until we meet again in the presence of the one divine that appears as many, may your devotion find its true home. Most people spend their entire lives searching for God in temples and churches, in books and ceremonies, never realizing that what they're desperately seeking is already within them. Today, I want to show you how to stop searching and start finding, how to turn your spiritual longing into direct, personal communion with the divine. You see, true spirituality isn't about believing, it's about experiencing. And my beloved friend, you didn't find this video by accident. Your soul led you here because it knows you're ready for something deeper than surface spirituality. You're ready for the real thing. In the next 30 minutes, you're going to learn the 3 fundamental principles that I've taught to thousands of souls over decades of spiritual guidance. These aren't just beautiful ideas. They're practical, proven methods that will transform your relationship with the divine from hoping and wishing into knowing and experiencing. You'll discover why your current spiritual practices might be keeping you stuck, how to recognize when God is actually speaking to you, and the one simple technique that can turn any moment, even your darkest hour, into a doorway to divine communion. Most importantly, you'll understand why your spiritual struggles haven't been failures. They've been preparing you for the breakthrough that's waiting on the other side of this video. Now, I know many of you have tried everything. You've read the books, attended the services, meditated when you could remember to, prayed when you felt desperate enough, and still that deep spiritual hunger remains unfed. You wonder if you're doing something wrong, if God is listening, if enlightenment is reserved for saints and sages who lived centuries ago. But here's what I've learned in my decades of walking with the divine. Every soul that feels this spiritual restlessness is being called to something magnificent. Your dissatisfaction with surface spirituality isn't a weakness. It's your soul refusing to settle for anything less than direct experience of God. The methods I'm about to share with you aren't theories from ancient texts. They're living principles that I've tested in the laboratory of my own consciousness and witnessed transform countless lives. They work because they're based on the fundamental laws of how consciousness connects with the divine. Today, we'll explore 3 sacred doorways that lead from spiritual seeking to spiritual finding. First, I'll show you the art of divine attunement, how to tune your consciousness like a radio to receive God's constant broadcast of love and guidance. This isn't about perfect meditation posture or hours of practice. It's about a simple shift in awareness that you can apply right now. Then, we'll discover the secret of spiritual magnetism, why some souls seem naturally connected to the divine while others struggle, and how you can develop that magnetic pull that draws God's presence into your daily life. Finally, I'll share with you the most powerful principle I've ever taught, the practice of divine friendship. This goes beyond worship, beyond prayer as you've known it, into a living, breathing relationship with the divine that transforms every aspect of your existence. But here's what might surprise you most. None of these principles require you to change your religion, abandon your current practices, or spend years in spiritual study. They work within whatever path you're already on, like keys that unlock doors you didn't even know were there. So settle in, open your heart, and prepare to discover why your spiritual journey has been leading you to this very moment, tuning your soul's radio to God's frequency. My dear friend, let me share with you a truth that changed everything for me. God is not hiding from you. The divine is broadcasting love, guidance, and presence every single moment, like a radio station that never goes off the air. The only reason we don't hear it is because we don't know how to tune our consciousness to the right frequency. Most people make the mistake of thinking they need to reach up to God, to somehow climb a spiritual mountain to get close to the divine. But this creates the very separation that blocks divine communion. You see, God is not above you, beyond you, or separate from you. The divine presence is the very fabric of your being, closer to you than your own breath. I remember when this truth first dawned on me as a young seeker. I had been meditating for hours, straining and struggling, trying to find God through sheer effort. One morning, exhausted from my spiritual wrestling, I simply surrendered. In that moment of letting go, I realized that what I had been desperately seeking was already there, had always been there, watching my search with infinite patience and love. This is the first secret of divine attunement. Stop seeking and start noticing. God's presence is woven into every moment of your life. It's in the pause between your thoughts, in the space between your heartbeats, in the stillness that exists even in the midst of chaos. But how do you develop this sacred attention? How do you shift from spiritual blindness to divine vision? It begins with what I call the practice of present moment awareness. Right now, as you're listening to these words, God is here. Not as a concept or belief, but as a living, breathing presence. Can you feel it? That subtle aliveness that animates your body, that aware space in which all your thoughts and feelings arise, That's not separate from the divine. That is the divine, expressing as your very consciousness. The ego mind tells us that God must be something spectacular, something that announces itself with trumpets and lightning. But the divine speaks in whispers, in gentle nudges, in moments of inexplicable peace that touch your heart when you least expect them. I once had a student who came to me in despair. She had been seeking God for 20 years, she said, and had never once felt the divine presence. I asked her to tell me about the most peaceful moment she could remember. Her eyes softened as she described watching her newborn daughter sleep, feeling overwhelmed by a love so vast it seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. That, I told her, was God loving through you. You see, we often miss divine communion because we're looking for it to fit our mental pictures of what spirituality should look like. We expect burning bushes and angelic choirs, but God comes as the love that floods your heart when you see a sunset, as the sudden knowing that everything will be okay, as the mysterious force that brings exactly the right person or opportunity into your life at precisely the right moment. The second aspect of divine attunement is learning to distinguish between the voice of wisdom and the chatter of the mind. Your mind is like a radio that picks up dozens of stations at once. Worries about the future, regrets about the past, judgments about the present. But beneath all this mental noise, there's another voice. It's quieter, gentler, but infinitely more reliable. This divine voice doesn't argue or compete with your thoughts. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It simply offers guidance with a quality of peace and certainty that your ordinary thinking never possesses. When this inner wisdom speaks, something in your soul recognizes it as truth. How do you cultivate your ability to hear this divine guidance? Through what I call receptive silence. This isn't about forcing your mind to be quiet. That only creates more struggle. Instead, it's about becoming like a clear mountain lake that perfectly reflects the sky. When your consciousness becomes still and receptive, divine guidance can reflect itself clearly in your awareness. But perhaps the most important aspect of divine attunement is understanding that God is always speaking to you, not just in formal prayer or meditation, but through the circumstances of your life, through the people you meet, through the opportunities and challenges that come your way. Every experience is a message from the divine, designed to awaken you to greater truth, deeper love, or higher wisdom. The job you lost might be redirecting you to your true calling. The difficult relationship might be teaching you unconditional love. The illness might be opening your heart to compassion. Nothing is random. Nothing is meaningless. Everything is part of the divine conversation with your soul. This is why I tell my students, don't just seek God in the temple. Seek God in the traffic jam. Don't just look for the divine in Scripture. Look for divine guidance in the smile of a stranger. The whole universe is God's temple, and every moment is a sacred opportunity for communion. Why some souls draw God like iron to a magnet? Now, my beloved friend, let me share with you something I've observed over decades of spiritual guidance. Some souls seem to effortlessly attract divine grace into their lives, while others struggle for years without seeming to make progress. What makes the difference? It's not intelligence, education, or even spiritual knowledge. It's what I call spiritual magnetism, the quality of consciousness that makes you irresistibly attractive to divine presence. And the beautiful truth is that anyone can develop this magnetism, regardless of their background or current level of spiritual development. The first quality that creates spiritual magnetism is sincere devotion. Notice I said sincere, not perfect. God responds to the authenticity of your heart, not the perfection of your practice. A single moment of genuine longing for the divine creates more magnetic pull than years of mechanical ritual. I remember a devotee who came to our ashram many years ago. He was not educated, not sophisticated in spiritual philosophy, but when he prayed, tears of love would flow from his eyes. His devotion was so pure, so sincere, that everyone who met him felt touched by something sacred. This man lived in constant awareness of God's presence, not because he was spiritually advanced, but because his love was real. You see, God cannot resist genuine love any more than you can resist the call of your own heart. When your devotion is authentic, when it comes from the depths of your being, rather than from obligation or spiritual ambition, it creates a magnetic field that draws divine grace like iron filings to a magnet. But what does sincere devotion actually look like in daily life? It's not about spending hours in formal prayer or wearing your spirituality on your sleeve. Sincere devotion is the quality of heart that sees every breath as a gift, every sunrise as a love letter from the divine, every challenge as an opportunity to grow closer to God. The second quality that creates spiritual magnetism is surrender. This might be the most misunderstood concept in all of spirituality, so let me be very clear about what surrender actually means. It doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up your intelligence. True surrender is the recognition that there's a wisdom greater than your limited understanding, and the willingness to align with that higher intelligence. When you truly surrender, you don't lose your power. You plug into infinite power. You stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting the process. You release your grip on how you think life should unfold and open yourself to what wants to emerge through you. I learned this lesson in the most unexpected way. Early in my spiritual journey, I had very specific ideas about how my path should develop. I wanted dramatic spiritual experiences, mystical visions, supernatural powers. But the more I grasped for these experiences, the more they eluded me. It was only when I surrendered my spiritual ambitions and simply opened my heart to whatever God wanted to give me that the real spiritual experiences began to flow. Surrender creates magnetic attraction because it removes the barriers that block divine flow. When you're constantly trying to control your spiritual progress, you create resistance. When you surrender, you become like a river channel that allows the divine current to move through you without obstruction. The third quality that amplifies spiritual magnetism is joy and gratitude. This surprises many seekers because they think spirituality should be serious, solemn, even sorrowful. But I have found that nothing attracts God's presence like a joyful heart. Joy is the natural state of consciousness when it recognizes its divine nature. Gratitude, too, creates powerful magnetic pull. When you're genuinely grateful, not just saying the words but feeling the reality of appreciation, you acknowledge that you're already receiving divine blessings. This acknowledgement opens the floodgates for even greater blessings to flow. But here's what many people don't understand. You don't need to wait until your life is perfect to feel grateful. You can be grateful for the very fact that you're alive, conscious, capable of seeking truth. You can be grateful for your spiritual hunger itself, because that hunger is proof that your soul knows there's something more. I often tell the story of a devotee who lived in poverty but radiated such joy that people traveled from far and wide just to be in her presence. When asked how she could be so happy with so little, she replied, "How can I not be joyful? The same God who created the stars lives in my heart. The same consciousness that moves the planets flows through my breath. I am the richest person alive." Now, let me address the barriers that block spiritual magnetism, because recognizing these obstacles is just as important as cultivating the magnetic qualities. The first barrier is doubt, not the healthy questioning that leads to deeper understanding, but the corrosive doubt that questions whether God even exists or cares about you personally. This kind of doubt creates static in your spiritual radio, making it difficult to receive divine guidance clearly. The second barrier is worry and anxiety. When your mind is constantly focused on problems and fears, you're broadcasting on the frequency of lack and limitation. God can't reach you on that frequency because the divine operates on the frequency of love, abundance, and infinite possibility. The third barrier is spiritual pride, the subtle ego satisfaction that comes from thinking you're more spiritually advanced than others. This pride creates separation, and separation dissolves the magnetic field that attracts divine grace. But here's the beautiful thing about spiritual magnetism. The moment you recognize these barriers, they begin to lose their power over you. Recognition is the first step toward transformation. When you catch yourself in doubt, you can choose faith. When you notice worry, you can choose trust. When you see pride arising, you can choose humility. Remember, my dear friend, you don't have to be perfect to be magnetic to the divine. You just have to be real, sincere, and willing to keep your heart open even when life gets challenging. God is not looking for perfect devotees. God is looking for authentic souls who are willing to love and be loved in return. From worshiper to friend, the ultimate spiritual relationship. Now we come to the most profound principle I've ever discovered in my decades of walking with the divine, the practice of divine friendship. This goes beyond traditional prayer, beyond worship as most people understand it, into a living, intimate relationship with God as your closest friend, constant companion, and most trusted advisor. Most people relate to God as a distant deity, someone to be feared, appeased, or petitioned in times of crisis. But I want to share with you a revolutionary truth. God wants to be your friend, not in some casual, superficial way, but in the deepest, most intimate friendship you can imagine. Think about your closest human friendship. What makes it special? It's the ease of communication, the trust, the shared experiences, the way you can talk about anything without fear of judgment. It's the comfort of knowing someone truly understands you and accepts you completely. Now imagine having that same quality of relationship with the infinite intelligence that created and sustains the universe. This is not fantasy or wishful thinking. This is the natural result of recognizing what you truly are. You are not separate from God. You are a unique expression of divine consciousness, like a wave that is both individual and part of the ocean. From this perspective, communion with the divine is not reaching towards something foreign, it's remembering your own deepest nature. I learned this through my relationship with Krishna, but you can cultivate this friendship with God in whatever form speaks to your heart. As Divine Mother, as Christ, as Allah, as the formless Absolute, or simply as the loving intelligence that animates all life. The form doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of intimate communion. How does divine friendship manifest in daily life? It begins with constant inner dialogue. Throughout the day, you share your thoughts, feelings, concerns, and joys with your divine friend, just as you would with any beloved companion. You ask for guidance before making decisions. You express gratitude for blessings received. You even share your doubts and struggles, knowing they'll be met with infinite understanding and love. But here's what makes this relationship truly extraordinary. Your divine friend responds. Not always in the dramatic ways you might expect, but through the subtle language of intuition, synchronicity, and divine orchestration of circumstances. Let me share a personal example. Years ago, I was facing a difficult decision about the direction of my spiritual work. I had been offered opportunities that seemed good on the surface, but didn't feel aligned with my deeper purpose. In my morning communion with the divine, I poured out my confusion and asked for clear guidance. That very day, I received 3 different signs that all pointed in the same direction. A conversation with a stranger who spoke words that perfectly addressed my situation, a passage in a book that fell open to exactly the page I needed, and an inner knowing that arose with such clarity it was unmistakable. This wasn't coincidence. It was my divine friend responding to my request for guidance. The key to recognizing these divine responses is developing what I call sacred sensitivity, the ability to perceive the subtle ways God communicates through the fabric of daily experience. Sometimes it's through people who appear in your life at exactly the right moment with exactly the right message. Sometimes it's through opportunities that open just when you need them most. Sometimes it's through challenges that redirect you toward your highest good. Your divine friend is always speaking to you through the circumstances of your life, but you must develop the eyes to see and the ears to hear this constant communication. This comes through practice, through paying attention, through trusting that every experience carries a message meant specifically for you. But divine friendship isn't just about receiving guidance, it's also about offering your life as service to the divine. True friends don't just take, they give. They look for ways to support and serve each other. In your relationship with God, this means offering your talents, your time, your very life as instruments through which divine love can express itself in the world. This is where divine friendship becomes transformative, not just for you, but for everyone whose life you touch. When you see yourself as a friend and servant of the divine, every action becomes an opportunity to express God's love. Your work becomes worship. Your relationships become channels for divine grace. Your challenges become opportunities to demonstrate trust in your divine friend. I remember a devotee who worked as a nurse. She transformed her job into spiritual practice by seeing each patient as a manifestation of the divine. She would silently pray for each person she served, offering her care as service to God. Her patients consistently healed faster and felt more peaceful in her presence. She had discovered the secret of divine friendship in action. This is the ultimate goal of spiritual life, not to escape the world, but to transform it through divine friendship. When you maintain constant awareness of your relationship with God, every moment becomes sacred, every interaction becomes holy, every breath becomes a prayer. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of divine friendship is how it transforms your understanding of love itself. Human love, no matter how pure, is limited by personality, circumstances, and time. Divine love is infinite, unconditional, and eternal. When you experience this love directly through intimate communion with God, it heals every wound in your heart and fills every emptiness in your soul. This divine love then overflows into all your human relationships. You find yourself loving others not because they deserve it or because it benefits you, but because love is simply your natural state when you're connected to your divine friend. You become a channel through which God's love reaches other souls who are hungry for that same divine connection. The practice of divine friendship doesn't require hours of formal meditation or complex spiritual techniques. It requires only the willingness to remain aware of God's presence throughout your day and to respond to that presence with love, trust, and sincere communication. Start today. Begin each morning by greeting your divine friend. Share your hopes and concerns. Ask for guidance. Throughout the day, maintain that sense of divine companionship. Before you sleep, review your day with gratitude, acknowledging the ways your divine friend has been present and active in your experience. This is not just spiritual practice. This is the way you were meant to live. You came into this world not as an orphan separated from your source, but as a beloved friend of the divine, temporarily playing in the realm of form, while never losing your connection to the infinite. My beloved friend, what we've explored today isn't just spiritual philosophy, it's a practical roadmap back to your true spiritual home. You've learned how to attune your consciousness to receive God's constant presence, how to develop the magnetic qualities that draw divine grace into your life, and most importantly, how to transform your entire spiritual journey from seeking into finding through the sacred practice of divine friendship. Remember, every technique I've shared grows stronger with practice, but the most important practice is simply remembering you are never alone, never unloved, never beyond the reach of divine grace. Your spiritual struggles have been preparing you for this understanding, and your deepest longings are God calling you home to yourself. So I want you to carry this truth with you. The God you've been seeking in temples and books, in practices and prayers, has been seeking you with infinitely greater love. Every breath you take is a love letter from the divine. Every moment of beauty that touches your heart is God saying, I am here. And every challenge that deepens your soul is the divine preparing you for greater communion. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being learning to recognize your own divine nature. Now, if what we've discussed today resonates with your soul, there's something I need to share with you. Because while today we've explored how to recognize and receive God's presence, there's another dimension that most seekers never discover, and that's how to become a channel for divine power in the world. In my next guidance, I reveal the ancient secret that transforms you from someone who receives God's grace into someone who radiates it. This isn't about becoming perfect or saintly. It's about discovering the one quality that makes ordinary souls into instruments of divine healing and transformation. This secret has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years, and when you understand it, you'll never look at your life purpose the same way again. So click on that video now, because your soul is ready for the next level of this sacred journey, and I'll be waiting there to guide you deeper into the mystery of divine service. Until we meet again in the light of the divine, may God's love surround you always.